Do 9/11 truthers commit the confirmation bias? So, it seems that so-called debunkers, or people who feel that the official story is correct and want to defend it against those who are skeptical, feel that so-called truthers, or what they call truthers, which are really 9/11 skeptics, commit a fallacy called confirmation bias. For those of you who don't know what confirmation bias is, it means when someone willfully ignores, or sometimes unconsciously ignores, evidence that's counter to their opinion, but instead only picks out the evidence which supports their opinion. So it's kind of like a form of cherry picking. It can prove why, or explain why, people become more like polarized when they're shown information that's counter to theirs, or even become more convinced of their opinion, or even associate a connection between two events that really have none, all because of this confirmation bias. So, a common example of confirmation bias is the story of the classic fable of the fox and the grape. And so this fox is going through the woods and is pretty fucking hungry and wants to, eat some grapes that it sees on a tree hanging. And as it tries to reach for the grapes, it can't. And it struggles and it can't. And so it goes off and says, well, those are sour grapes anyway. So this idea can show us that people take counter information and then ignore it. In other ways, maybe a person gets told that their cigarette habit is not a good one, and then they just think, well, I know this one guy that lived to 100. So it's a really way of ignoring. It's a kind of cognitive dissonance. So the bunkers believe that 9/11 skeptics, or what they call truthers, commit this fallacy. They say, well, you believe the government did it, so you look for evidence that supports it, but you ignore all the evidence that goes against it. Now, I can't speak for every claim that every 9/11 skeptic has ever made, but I am sure that some of the main ones within the events that happened with the 3 building collapses in New York City, in the Pentagon, and what happened in Pennsylvania. But my focus today is where I am knowledgeable in, is what happened in my home city of New York City and the 3 towers that came down. So when it comes to claims that revolve around these events, I can be certain about them, and that's why I'm going to focus on just those today. So the bunkers commit the straw man by assuming that, say, well, you, truther, believe that the bombs were planted in the building, and that because of that, you look for only the evidence of what would be pseudo evidence of explosives, and you ignore all the evidence to the contrary, which would be a gravitational fire-induced collapse. Right? So the problem with this idea, they'll say, you have a preconceived idea that the buildings were loaded with nanothermite, and brought down. But this is truly, and I'm evoking Alan Watts here, to make the tail wag the dog. You're being confused, and you have to kind of turn them back around and say, no, this is actually what's going on. And so what the debunkers fail to see is all the physical evidence which conflicts with their hypothesis, or aka the official story, of a fire-induced collapse. And so all that is weighted against them, but they fail to see that because the status quo is very comfy, and you feel right. Maybe these people, I believe, probably do feel that they're correct, but it's not because of any evidence. It's because they think, well, that's what everyone else thinks. You're the crazy one. So because of that, it's just it feels like a form of validation in of itself, just to be with the crowd and the bandwagon. But So we have the evidence that's collected about what happened to those towers. All the stuff that we were able to see and preserve through, testimony or forensics evidence or physical evidence. And when you collect this evidence, you have two hypotheses posted. You say either a fire-induced collapse brought all three towers down in their own footprint at nearly the rate of free fall, and for Building 7 at the rate of free fall for 10 stories. So either we say that, or 8 stories, I'm sorry. Or we say that this had to be done due to explosives because of Newton's second and third laws, and that you can't have a leveled symmetrical collapse that's so sudden and quick, and that has this kind of acceleration without explosives moving things out of the way, moving all the structure below it out of the way so it can fall. I.e., there's a missing jolt. Especially you can notice this in the north tower, the tower with the antenna. As it comes down cleanly, and there's no jolt. You would expect that the top part of the building was really crushing into the lower part. There'd be a jolt, just like when you hit a hammer on a nail, and that even though that it's driving down the force, your hammer goes back up a little bit it meets resistance of the nail, but the nail still goes down. That jolt is missing. So, okay, but I'm going off a tangent. So basically, there's that second hypothesis that the buildings had thermite in them or some kind of explosive to bring them down because of these factors. Well, it's just not even those factors. It's just the hypothesis that explosive versus fire collapse. Now you look at the evidence. What does the evidence support? You see, that's all it is. That's what the debunkers fail to see. There's no preconceived ideas here. We're looking at evidence and we're posting hypotheses. Very scientific. One hypothesis says fire-induced collapse. The other one says controlled demolition. Now we look at the evidence. Which is supported? And obviously, controlled demolition is supported. Just like the infographic you're seeing on your screen right now, none of those factors are created in the fire-induced collapse. They're impossible. You can't get them. It's like gravity just doesn't work for 20 seconds. No, it doesn't work that way. That doesn't happen. I'm not saying people said that happened, but I'm just giving an example. Like, you can't just say a fundamental law of physics just gives up for some reason and then comes back later. That doesn't make any sense. And I'm not saying it can happen. I don't want to commit an induction fallacy, but damn, it's been happening for as long as we know it, so we can assume it's still been happening. Unless we want to now assume that, hey, God came in and bent the laws of physics so the terrorists could win? I don't know. So, I don't even want to get in there. So to recap, the fire collapse hypothesis has almost little to no support beyond that there was a fire. And that the evidence instead supports a hypothesis of controlled demolition. And this is precisely the reason for the demolition claim. There's evidence for it. That's the only reason why people support this claim. It's not because they want to believe that there are bombs in these buildings. It's fucking ridiculous to believe that. They believe this because there are facts to support it. I don't know what's so fucking hard, but you know what's so... No, I know it's hard. I'm sorry. I know it's fucking hard. It's status quo. It's about narratives. It's about not giving up the way you've been feeling for a long time because the implication is just too much. I do my 9/11 activism. I stand out in Ground Zero and I try to tell people about this every weekend. And what I notice is foreigners are usually very open to this. And I'm not talking about foreigners that don't understand English. I mean foreigners that can speak English. When they see the evidence that we're presented with, that's presented to them, they can't dismiss it. They can't just say this is a farce. This is just ridiculous. You're commit some act of bulverism and say, oh well, you just want to believe this. No, there's nothing like that. They just say, wow, this is pretty heavy, and I'm glad it's not my country. Okay. Well, the ones that it matters for them to see, this American citizens. I mean, it still affects foreigners too, because it's a cookie cutter foreign policy shaped by the United States government and the war on terror that they're wasting billions too on. So it affects them as well. So in this case, the debunkers themselves are committing a confirmation bias. they're ignoring all the phenomenon which points to controlled demolition, and instead are picking and choosing almost no real evidence, and instead, pointing to the fallacies that I have another video about, like motive fallacy, or straw man fallacy. And because of that, they themselves are committing confirmation bias. So this is the most grandest form of projection you can get. People who are so deluded by their own narratives are letting themselves commit this confirmation bias. They're just it's somewhat sad, but it can be fixed. It can be helped. It's just acts of bulverism and strawman, but it is a form of projection, though, and it's kind of ironic. Well, I don't know if it's truly ironic, but it damn sure is sad and somewhat comical from a gallows humor point of view. Well, that's basically it. I just wanted to show how the confirmation bias is not on the 9/11 skeptics, but on the debunkers, quote-unquote, themselves. I want to thank you for listening. If you are listening, this takes a lot of courage to do. It's not easy confronting these facts. And I don't want to say you're a hero or anything, but it's just by doing this, by taking the time to learn about this, you're taking a step that many haven't taken, and that means something in of itself. So you just know that. So again, thank you for listening. I didn't even introduce myself yet. Well, I don't think do. I have to. I'm Meta Self, and now I'm leaving. Have a good one.